So before somebody asks and says this in the comments, is your rifle clear? Oh, it is now. So I know iron sights are kind of dated nowadays, and a lot of people really don't use them or train with them. I don't think they're even taught in the military much anymore. But pretty much every rifle, at least for the AR-15 platform, is going to have a front sight and a rear sight. Maybe not a carry handle, but a flip-up style of rear sight. And you still need to know how to use that. You still need to know how to utilize that. And you absolutely, if you have this mounted, especially a backup iron sight, you need to know how that's actually zeroed, if you zeroed it at all. So for today's video, I am going to be utilizing the M16A4. Now understand that if you have an M4 or something similar to that with a shorter sight radius, these numbers that I'm going to tell you are not accurate. I believe the rear sight is 0.75 per click on the M4 and 1.75 on the front sight. So these numbers are only going to be completely useful for a 20-inch full rifle length sighting system styled AR-15. So when it comes to zeroing, we're going to go over just the basic military style zero. So we're going to set up a zeroing target. This is not a true zeroing target, this is a print off, but understand that these are simulated. These squares are simulated to represent a 1-inch square at 100 at the 25-meter line. So you're going to go ahead and put this down at the 25, and then from there on out, all these numbers are going to correlate and make sense to each one of these blocks, which again equates to 1 inch or 1 MOA. Now before we ever actually pull the trigger, we need to go ahead and check our rear sight drum. On this, the rear sight drum is going to be right there. Now, you can see you can adjust this up and down. What this should be set to, if I can get to it, is going to be a small 3 and a 6. It's actually a flat spot. Okay, you want to set it to that, and do not touch that after you've done this initial setting. Just leave it at 3, 6 the entire time. Something else we're going to want to check is we're going to want to make sure that our peep sight is on the small peep, not the large peep. The large peep says 0 to 2. The small peep just has this concaved surface in here with a much smaller hole. This is what you're going to want to use when you're zeroing, and pretty much the entire time that you have the M16. So after we fire our first group and we discovered that our group is either high or low, you're going to want to make your elevation adjustments all through the front sight here. This post itself right here. If you look, there's a small detent that I can push down with this bullet tip. What you're going to want to do is you're going to rotate that left or right. There's an arrow here that says up. So if you spin this as it's actually going down into the post, you're bringing your point of impact up. I'll go over that in a little bit more detail so it makes a little bit more sense. Now this really confuses people because you see your front sight post going down and that brings your point of impact up. So when you think about that, when you bring your front sight post down, as in it's getting shorter, when you actually sight through this rifle, you're going to want to naturally raise your muzzle up to compensate for that. That is how that works. Okay, so this arrow is correct. It does say up. You're going to spin your front sight post down, your muzzle will raise, and your point of impact will go up. Okay, so every single time that we move this front sight post up or down, one click, right? So one to the next actual detent hole is going to be 1.25 inches. So that means that on this zero target, every single square is 1 inch, right? So every click is going to move that front sight post up or down one full square, and then 0.25 of the next one above or below it. Okay, so we've went over how to adjust the elevation on the front sight post. Now we're going to go ahead and work our way back to the rear sight in the rear sight windage drum over here. Remember, we are not touching the elevation drum yet on the rear sight. Leave that still at 3/6. Okay, so this is going to be your windage knob right here. So you'll see there's an R this way, nothing the other way. Turning this one click, following the R, will move your point of impact 0.5 MOA, half an inch to the right. Going one click the other way, move your point of impact 0.5 inches or 0.5 MOA to the left. Okay, after following those steps, our M16 should now be zeroed for the 25 and the 300. Should equate to the same thing. I'm going to throw some slides in here. I'm going to go over where you should hold that for the 1, the 2, and the 3 without having to adjust your actual elevation drum. So when it comes to iron sights, you notice that you can't go any lower than 300 on your rear sight setting. So what we have to do is something called a hold off. In this case, we're going to hold in the lower third portion of this human silhouette. And the reason for that is because our sights are set at 3. So if we aim center mass, our impacts are going to go higher than we anticipate, meaning you might have a round go left or right of the shoulder. Now at 300, we're going to want to put our front sight at the center mass of that target. That is because our point of aim, point of impact, if your rifle is properly zeroed, should hit exactly where you're aiming. In this case, you want to hit center mass. So you put your front sight center mass, squeeze the trigger, should impact. Alright, so we've learned our holds for the 1, 2, and 3. What about 4, 5, and 6? Well, remember that drum I told you not to touch? We're going to touch it. So let's say our target is at 500 meters. We're going to take this drum, we're actually going to adjust this drum up until the line is actually on the 5. There's a line on the rear sight right above the numbers on the knob. Those correlate to where you should be at. So I'm set to 5 right now. What if my target is at 550? Well, if you count the clicks from the 5 to the 6 setting, let's do that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So there are 10 clicks from the 5 to the 6. If someone is at 550, you simply dial 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Because every click from the 5 to the 6 is going to be 10 meters. Really easy, really simple once you understand that. And the breakdown of the 4 to the 5 is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Going from the 3 to the 4, we're going to have, it's tight, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, so I'm going to go over something more modern, something that most of us probably have on our rifles right now. My example is going to be the Primary Arms ACSS Raptor reticle. This one is in yards. It's a great reticle. It's something that is very similar to the ACOG. So if you know the ACOG, you're going to pick this up right away. There's actually some benefits to using this. I'm going to go ahead and flip over through some slides on my computer and let you guys learn that way. Because I can't really demonstrate reticle holds and such through a camera. So this is a breakdown of the ACSS Raptor reticle, and what you're going to see is this red chevron. Now at the very tip of that chevron is your 100-yard aiming point. Inside that chevron is 200. At the tip of that stick there is 3, and that 3 also intersects with the legs of the chevron. Below that we have the 4, the 5, and then the 6. Now if you're new to this reticle, you're going to notice that the 1, the 2, and the 3 are fairly close, and you'll see they start getting gradually further and further away for the 4, 5, and 6. That's because as the bullet slows down, it drops more, which means you have to elevate your rifle further to impact those targets. So this large horseshoe here is designed to be a lead indicator for, I believe, a target running at like 8.6 miles per hour. I've never used it as such because I've never been able to shoot at targets that are actually running, but what it is great for is being a CQB reticle. So essentially if you put this horseshoe inside of the chest and you're at that close range, you will absolutely hit the target no matter what you do. So wind holes deserve their own entire video, and making wind calls is always a difficult thing to do, and it just takes a lot of experience. But the ACSS Raptor actually has wind holes on here, which is great. That's something the ACOG does not do. So what we have here are the close ones are for 5, and then the further ones are for 10. Now you'll also notice that some of these only have maybe 1 dot of windage instead of 2. That's because you only need to make wind calls really at the 4, 5, and the 6, and at the 400 it's far less than it's going to be at the 5 or the 6, and at 3 and in there is absolutely no wind calls made. This is the Army's Type E silhouette. It is roughly translated to a human torso. So the width of that target is 20 inches wide, the height is 40 inches tall, and the head box is going to be 10 inches wide.
understanding our target is important because the horizontal lines on the ACSS reticle represent roughly 20 inches wide at its corresponding distance. So at 400, that stadia line represents 20 inches. This is going to be very, very important to actually figure out at what range our target is at. Now, the stadia lines represent 20 inches and the target is 20 inches. So when I bring up my 300-yard chevron, I'll find that that chevron fits within this target. That tells me that this target must be at roughly 300 yards. So in this next example, you'll see that the chevron is hanging over the sides. And as I raise that up, you'll see the 400 also hanging over the sides. And once I get to the 5 fits pretty well inside, so that target is roughly at 500 yards. And in this example, you'll see that as I go through the reticle here, the only one that actually fits is going to be the final one, so that means this target must be close to 600 yards. So for the final example, I'm going to show how to range a target if only the head is exposed or the target is too close to actually utilize one of those stadia lines. So in this example, you're going to see that the 300-yard chevron actually fits in the head box. Now remember, the head box is 10 inches across, so half. And because this is a 300-yard reticle, that means 300 divided by 2 is 150. That's going to tell me that this target is actually at roughly 150. This is pretty important because in real life, people are not just going to stand out in the open and let you just aim at them and range them and engage them. People are going to duck, people are going to hide. You might only have a head that's exposed, and making that critical headshot could mean life or death. Now, this headshot trick works for any of those stadia lines. So if you can fit the 400 stadia line into the head box, that means the target is at 200. If you can fit the 500 in the head box, that means the target is at 250. Just take whatever range you can fit inside the head box divided by 2, and that is the distance of that target.
Now, remember that those stadia lines, those holes, are not going to be exactly to what you're shooting. Changing the barrel length, changing the sight radius, changing the type of round, that's going to change those holes. So 300 might not exactly be 3, 400 won't exactly be 4. You need to go out and actually shoot those and actually figure out where those impacts are actually at according to your reticle. Alright, so this is going to go ahead and conclude my ACSS and iron sight video. We're just scratching the surface on that. There's tons of other information out there to learn, tons more to say. I'm just going to wrap this up right now, and I might have some future videos. But believe it or not, this is all shot in the same day. It's just that the weather has taken a turn. So it's New Year's Eve. Happy New Year. I'll see all you guys in 2024.